When a woman decided to lend her car to her daughter-in-law, she hoped it would be a step toward mending their rocky relationship. But when the car was returned, battered and in terrible condition, the lies that followed were even more shocking. Her daughter-in-law refused to admit any wrongdoing or pay for the damage. Feeling betrayed and powerless, the woman came up with a plan that would leave her daughter-in-law completely blindsided. Before we continue, please take some time to subscribe to Dailydose, like, and share this video with your friends. Lending the car to her daughter-in-law wasn't just an act of kindness, it was a hopeful step toward reconciliation. The relationship between the two women had been fraying for some time, slowly unraveling in the months and years after Layla entered the family. The mother had once envisioned Layla as a potential bridge to family harmony, someone who would support Toby and perhaps even bring joy back into the house that had been shadowed by grief since the death of her husband, Nathan. But those hopes had long since withered away, replaced by a creeping realization that Layla wasn't just indifferent. She was actively driving a wedge between Toby and his mother. The relationship had become tense, awkward, and emotionally draining. Holidays, once filled with laughter and warmth, had turned cold and quiet. Family dinners, where conversations used to flow freely, were now filled with forced politeness, punctuated by Layla's barely concealed disdain. Each gathering felt like a battle, one where the mother tried desperately to hold on to her connection with her son, while Layla slowly but surely nudged him further and further away. It wasn't always this way. When Layla first entered Toby's life, she seemed like the perfect match, beautiful, confident, and outgoing. Toby had met her at work, and they'd quickly fallen in love. When Toby introduced her to his mother, Layla made an impeccable first impression. She arrived dressed immaculately, with her hair perfectly styled, and greeted her future mother-in-law with a warm hug and kind words. "I've heard so much about you," she said, her voice sweet and sincere. The mother had been instantly charmed, feeling a glimmer of hope that perhaps this young woman would become a close and loving member of their family. The first few months were filled with optimism. Layla seemed kind, attentive, and thoughtful. She joined family dinners, helped with preparations, and often engaged in conversations about her life, her career, and her future with Toby. Everything seemed perfect on the surface, but the cracks began to show soon after the wedding. Toby and Layla's wedding was a beautiful affair, simple yet elegant. Mother's heart swelled with pride as she watched her son say his vows, speaking so passionately about their future together. She wiped away tears, thinking of how proud Nathan would have been to see their son taking this important step in life. It felt like a new beginning, a fresh chapter after years of grief following Nathan's death. But as the months passed, it became clear that Layla had no intention of forming the kind of bond with her mother-in-law that had been hoped for. After the wedding, Layla's demeanor shifted. The warm, kind woman who had made such a great first impression began to reveal her true self. It started subtly, small remarks that seemed innocent but carried an undercurrent of passive aggression. She would comment on how long it took for dinner to be ready or how disorganized certain things seemed, all while maintaining a facade of politeness. "Oh, I see you haven't had time to redecorate yet," she would say with a smile that never reached her eyes. "I suppose you're just used to how things have always been." The mother would smile back, pretending not to notice the insult, but each comment stung a little more deeply than the last. As time passed, Layla's behavior grew more blatant. She would criticize the mother for small things like being late by a few minutes or for not following her advice about household matters. It became clear that Layla was positioning herself as the dominant figure in Toby's life, while subtly pushing his mother aside. What made it worse was Toby's complete obliviousness to what was happening. He was so in love with Layla that he didn't notice the subtle digs or the manipulation. Layla played the part of the perfect wife in front of him, sweet and accommodating, while subtly undermining his mother whenever Toby wasn't around. The breaking point came with the car incident. Layla had called one afternoon asking if she could borrow the car because hers was in the shop for repairs. Her tone had been friendly, almost too friendly as she explained the situation. Toby suggested I ask if I could borrow your car for a few days. My friend lives a few hours away and I can't get there without a vehicle, she said. The mother hesitated for a moment but then relented, thinking this might be an opportunity to extend an olive branch, to show Layla that she was willing to help and mend their relationship. When Layla came to pick up the car, everything seemed fine. She thanked her mother-in-law with a bright smile and promised to take care of the vehicle. I'll bring it back in perfect condition, she said, but that promise was soon broken. A week passed, and when Layla finally returned the car, it was in a condition that left the mother speechless. Scratches covered the exterior, the bumper was dented, and the interior smelled foul, like something had been left to rot inside. "What happened to my car?" she asked, struggling to keep her voice calm. Layla's response was infuriating. Without missing a beat, she claimed, "It was like this when I picked it up. I didn't do anything to it." The lie was so blatant, so confidently delivered, that for a moment it left her mother-in-law stunned. She couldn't believe the audacity of it. To make matters worse, Toby sided with Layla immediately. "Mom, she told me the car was already in bad shape. Maybe you didn't notice," he said, his tone filled with concern for his wife rather than the obvious damage to the car. It was in that moment, standing there in disbelief, that the realization hit her. There was no point in arguing. Layla had Toby so thoroughly wrapped around her finger that any attempt to reason with him would be futile. But something had to be done. This wasn't just about the car. It was about years of manipulation, years of passive aggression, and a relationship that had become toxic and one-sided. That night, as she lay awake in bed, an idea began to form. Confronting Layla directly wouldn't work. It would only cause more tension and give Layla more ammunition to use against her, but there had to be a way to make Layla understand that actions have consequences. After hours of restless thinking and some late-night internet browsing, the solution presented itself: animal attractant spray. A product designed to lure animals to a specific location, typically used by hunters, but in this case, it would serve a much different purpose. The next day, after a visit to the pet store, the plan was set in motion. That night, she drove over to Toby and Layla's house under the cover of darkness. Parking a few blocks away to avoid suspicion, she approached the house with the spray in hand. Moving quietly, she sprayed the attractant all around their yard, driveway, and front porch, ensuring that the scent would draw animals from all over the neighborhood. The plan was simple. The animals would create chaos, leaving behind a mess that Layla couldn't ignore, and it would all happen without a single confrontation. The next morning, the phone call came, just as expected. Toby's voice on the other end was frantic. "Mom, we don't know what happened, but there are animals everywhere. The yard is a mess, and the house smells horrible. We've never seen anything like this." There was a quiet satisfaction in hearing his panic, though she kept her tone calm and sympathetic. "Oh no, that sounds terrible. I wonder what could have caused it," she said, feigning innocence. The animals had done their job, leaving behind a disaster that Layla couldn't easily clean up. And though Toby was oblivious to the real cause, Layla surely knew that this wasn't just a random occurrence. She had no proof, of course, but the message had been delivered loud and clear. In the weeks that followed, Layla's behavior changed. The passive-aggressive comments stopped, and she maintained a noticeable distance during family gatherings. No longer did she try to control the conversation or criticize every small detail. There was an unspoken understanding that things had shifted. Meanwhile, Toby, unaware of the role his mother had played in the chaos, began calling her more frequently, checking in to see how she was doing. It was as though the balance had been restored, with Layla realizing that her behavior wouldn't go unchecked, and Toby returning to the son who once leaned on his mother for support. Nathan's words had proven true. Toby did need his mother, though not in the way anyone had expected. But more than that, it had become clear that boundaries had to be set, that respect was something that had to be earned. And while the lesson had been delivered in a way that avoided direct confrontation, it had been effective nonetheless. Layla had learned that actions have consequences, and the power dynamics that had once been so skewed had finally leveled out. The bond between mother and son, once strained and frayed, had been rebuilt, stronger and more resilient than ever before. Looking back, the question remains, what would anyone else have done in that situation? Would they have let the lies slide or found a way to quietly take control? The answer lies not in anger or confrontation, but in cleverness and patience, an approach that ensured dignity remained intact and respect was demanded without ever raising a voice.